She took her son's eyes out because he wouldn't close them during a prayer. In May of 2012 in Mexico, Maria del Carmen Rios Garcia had a sign that the world was going to end. So she got her family together to fast and recite a prayer. Maria told her 5-year-old son during the prayer to close his eyes, but he refused. And this prayer was like no other. They were all chanting and dancing in a circle similar to a ritual, and it was obvious that Fernando was just scared. Maria told Fernando to close his eyes so many times, and since he refused, she got fed up, so she grabbed a spoon and dug out his eyeballs. She decided to do this so she could cleanse them. A teenage boy who was locked in one of the rooms in the house heard Fernando's screams, broke free, and ran outside for help. Officers ended up breaking into the home and were met with a horrific scene. Fernando was immediately rushed to the hospital and luckily survived. He was given glass eyes and is now in care. A neighbor revealed that he thought the family was just deeply religious and didn't know that they were Satanists. Maria and her family members who were all involved were arrested and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
She has been dubbed the Ice Cream Killer after murdering 2 men. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murders of Holger Holz and Manfred Hindenburger. From very early on in her life, Estebaliz Carranza didn't have great relationships with men. Growing up, her relationship with her father was incredibly strained. He could be very controlling, possessive, demanding and strict, and he really made Estebaliz feel that she as a woman had to obey him. She would later say that throughout her childhood she started to develop very vicious and violent thoughts towards her father, but she never acted upon any of them. At age 22, she would move from Barcelona, where she grew up, to Germany, and while working in a shop, she would meet Holger Holz, a salesman who was 15 years older than her. The two met, they started dating, and eventually they got married. Having a family of her own was a dream for Estebaliz, and Holger would use this desire against her to get Estebaliz to do whatever he wanted. He suggested that they move from Germany to Austria and open up their own ice cream shop, and once they were established, successful on their feet, then maybe they could start trying for a baby. Despite not really wanting to move, Estebaliz agreed because she thought this was just one more step to her getting her happy little family. After moving to Austria, quickly all of the responsibilities from the business fell on Estebaliz. She would do all of the work inside the shop, spending hours upon hours in there, and then when she come home, she would find Holger lazing on the couch, who would then dish out demands to her. Holger had also started becoming very abusive towards Estebaliz, and often the couple would get into very fiery arguments. As so many people do when they're trapped in unhappy marriages or relationships, Estebaliz began seeking that validation from somewhere else. And soon another man caught her attention. Manfred Hindenburger was an ice cream machine salesman, and Estebaliz working and owning the ice cream shop, the two eventually crossed paths. And they hit it off. There were fireworks between the two. Manfred was giving Estebaliz everything that Holger wasn't. He was making her feel worthy, showing her attention, making her feel seen. She felt beautiful and appreciated, and she fell head over heels for him. When Manfred suggested that Estebaliz divorce from Holger so that they could get married and that they could start their own family, Estebaliz didn't even have to consider it. Seemingly, Holger didn't neither, because when she brought the idea of divorce up to him, he agreed right away. In the meantime, however, he would still have to live in the house with Estebaliz, so he was continuing to abuse her. Up until one evening when she had had enough. On the 27th of April 2008, they had got into yet another heated argument, and within this argument, Holger told Estebaliz that she would be nothing without him. As he was sat at his computer, Estebaliz retrieved one of his own guns, creeped up behind him, and shot Holger in the head at least twice, killing him. The next day, when trying to get rid of his body, Estebaliz actually tried to light him on fire inside of their apartment, but when that didn't work, using a chainsaw, she began to dismember Holger. She would keep his dismembered body parts inside of ice cream tubs, which were eventually left in the freezer of the ice cream shop before being encased in cement in the basement of the ice cream shop. After this, Esther Belize continued her relationship with Manfred, telling anyone who asked that Holger had left her for another woman. However, unfortunately, as the months and then years went past, history began to repeat itself and Manfred started being abusive towards Esther Belize. She suspected that Manfred was cheating on her, and so she started to look through his phone, where she saw an array of photos of different women along with text messages. When she brought this up to Manfred, this resulted in a huge argument. On the night of the 21st of November 2010, Esther Belize is laid next to Manfred in bed as he is asleep snoring. With everything running through her mind, she decided that she couldn't do this anymore. She could no longer be with him. She slipped out of the bed and retrieved the gun that she used to kill her husband and fired at least 4 shots into Manfred as he slept, killing him. Again, she would dismember Manfred's body, storing it in some ice cream tubs in the freezer of the ice cream shop before eventually putting him in the cement under the basement as well. For a while, Esther Belize thought that she had gotten away with it. She had murdered her first husband without any repercussions, and now she had just done it again. However, in June 2011, maintenance workers would make a shocking discovery. The workmen were doing some sort of work in the basement of the shop. It was something like a burst pipe, and when they went down there, they were overcome with this foul, strong smell and noticed cracks in the cement. They would go on to discover the dismembered remains of Holger Holtz and Manfred Wintenberger. But by the time they found these and reported it to the police, Esther Belize was already long gone. As soon as she got a whiff that someone was on her tail, she fled, leaving Austria and going to Italy, where she would be arrested 4 days later. At the trial for the double murders, Esther Belize Carranza would be found guilty and handed a sentence of life imprisonment within a secure mental institution.
This missing 14-year-old girl's body was just discovered in the singer's car. Although we don't have much information, here's what we know so far. David Anthony Burke, also known as David, is a rising singer with songs like Romantic Homicide and Here With Me that went viral on TikTok and earned him millions of fans. On September 8th of 2025, so literally just a couple weeks ago, a Tesla was found sitting in a Hollywood impound lot when workers noticed a terrible smell. When they opened the car, they found a bag hidden in the front trunk area, and once they looked inside of that bag, they discovered human remains. Now, when they found these human remains, they were badly decomposed and the body was basically dismembered. Once police were called, investigators quickly confirmed that the car was registered to the singer David. During this discovery, David was on his Withered World Tour, which kicked off in August, and even though this was all being discovered in his car, he still continued with his tour dates. Police mentioned that David was being cooperative with the whole investigation, but just recently, David canceled the rest of his US dates. As part of the investigation, police searched a Hollywood Hills home that is tied to David, and they took electronics and any other kind of evidence. As for the body that was found in David's car, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner confirmed that it belonged to 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Back in April of 2024, Celeste Rivas Hernandez vanished from Lake Elsinore, California when she was only 13 years old. For more than a year, her family searched for her, but there was no trace of her anywhere. Now you're probably thinking, how does David tie into all of this besides Celeste's body being found in his car? It's been alleged that Celeste and David were actually in a relationship. Mind you, he's 20 years old and she was only 14. There's a lot of speculation that the two started talking back in 2021, which would make Celeste only 11 years old at the time. When Celeste's family were being questioned about her, her mom stated that she knew that her daughter had a boyfriend named David, but that's all she knew. When the police were examining Celeste's body, they noticed that she had a tattoo that said "shh" on her right index finger, and they also discovered that David has the same exact tattoo. Also, allegedly recently, someone hacked into David's iCloud account and they leaked photos of him and Celeste together. There's also a demo song that has been unreleased and it's surfacing online, and in the lyrics he's talking about a girl named Celeste. Online rumors have even speculated that maybe Celeste was pregnant, but police have not confirmed this. Once this information came out to the public, many people started going through his song lyrics, music videos, reposts to see if they could find any clues. Although we don't know if David has been questioned, a person of interest, or just a suspect, there was a past podcast that he came out in and revealed something interesting. Apparently, he would hold funerals at his shows, and he had this alter ego who was his evil self. Now, this alter ego would apparently take the lives of people and get in between his relationships. What makes this case even wilder is that new information just keeps coming out, and it leaves people with even more questions. That's all the information I have on this case as of right now, but once more information comes out, I can make a part 2 to this video. Rest in peace to Celeste. She was only 14 years old, and what happened to her is truly devastating, and I pray that she gets the justice that she deserves.
Let's talk about how in the past 2 years, 12 bodies have mysteriously been found in an Austin, Texas lake. Locals believe a serial killer named the Rainy Street Ripper is responsible, and this man believes that he was targeted and drugged but survived to tell the story. Since 2022, 12 bodies have been found in Lady Bird Lake, which is a portion of the Colorado River that runs directly through downtown Austin. All of the bodies found were of men in or around their 30s, all of which were out drinking on nearby Rainy Street, which is a really popular street littered with bars and restaurants. So far, in just 2024, 3 bodies were found, all of which are still unidentified. I'll go more into detail about all of the victims later, but this is Jeff Jones. On June 23rd of last year, Jeff was visiting Austin for a bachelor party with 12 of his closest friends. The night started off with them going to dinner at the Iron Cactus and then to the Rustic Tap. At some point, Jeff blacked out, which is odd because he's 6'3" and can handle his alcohol, and that night in particular, he wasn't even drinking that much. At around 1:30 in the morning, Jeff became separated from his friends, and not long after, his phone went dead and all communication stopped. Then at around 4 a.m., an anonymous 911 call came in from someone who saw Jeff lying unconscious at the bottom of the historic West 6th Street Bridge. The bridge overlooks a creek which flows into Lady Bird Lake, and it's about a 25-foot drop. So Jeff was rushed to the hospital where he underwent emergency surgery on his kidneys, his liver, and his lung, and he also had to have his spleen removed. He broke 7 vertebrae, his shoulder, and 2 of his ribs. He woke up in the hospital with metal rods holding his back together more than 2 weeks later with no recollection of what happened. Authorities found that he tested positive for benzodiazepine, a sedative family that includes Rohypnol, which is commonly known as the date rape drug. Nobody, not even Jeff himself, knows what happened that night, as 3 hours are completely unaccounted for. But he believes that he was targeted, drugged, and possibly pushed off the bridge that night. He fell within 5 feet of the water, and had he actually landed in the water, he would have drowned and floated off without anyone knowing. According to locals, that bridge specifically has a high railing, which would make it incredibly difficult to just fall over, drunk or not. And adding to the mystery is the fact that Jeff was found in the exact same spot as Randy Lexfold, except Randy sadly died. Randy was also visiting the area from out of town, just like Jeff, but he was found in 2019. Since 2022, 12 other bodies would be pulled from Lady Bird Lake under suspicious circumstances. But I want to start off with the mysterious death of Riyad Hamad, which occurred long before anyone else. On April 15th, 2008, Riyad's body was pulled from the lake. His hands and feet were bound, and his entire face was wrapped in duct tape, yet the Austin Police Department ruled his death a suicide. In November of 2018, Martin Gutierrez had dinner with his brother and then went to a bar on Rainy Street. According to his brother, Martin's behavior got more unusual and belligerent as the night went on, which is weird considering Martin wasn't drinking that much. The last time Martin was ever seen was on security footage walking towards the lake, and then he vanished. His body would be found 8 days later in Lady Bird Lake. Austin PD ruled his death as an accidental drowning, but what's odd is that Martin had an unexplained contusion on the back of his head. These are the rest of the victims who were found in the lake, starting with Ricky Parks, who was found in July of 2022. Authorities believe he likely drowned. The next is Christopher Gutierrez, found in December of 2022, along with Kyle Thornton and Jose Moreno. All of their deaths were deemed not suspicious with the exception of Jose, who was shot while he was driving and drove into the lake. The next victim is Jason John, who was found on February 13th, 2023. He was last seen on Rainy Street a week earlier, and according to his mom, he didn't know how to swim and purposely never went near the water because of this. She doesn't believe this was an accident. The next is Clifton Axtell, who was found on March 5th, 2023. He went missing a week prior near Stubbs, which is a barbecue restaurant near Rainy Street. His death was ruled undetermined. Then we have Christopher Hayes Clark and Jonathan Honey. Both were found in the lake in April of last year. Jonathan was last seen at a food truck on Rainy Street just 1 day prior. The last body pulled from the lake in 2023 was Moga Dogel, and I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that correctly. His cause of death was also undetermined. 3 more bodies have been pulled from the lake just this year, and while they're all still unidentified, authorities aren't investigating them as homicides. Austin police are denying any rumors of a possible serial killer, and they say that all of these deaths are either undetermined, suicides, or accidental drowning since the lake is so close to the nightlife on Rainy Street. The city of Austin plans to increase safety measures like adding more lighting, fencing, and security cameras in the area. And while all of this would be extremely helpful, locals can't help but feel like a serial killer is on the loose targeting these men, and they've even named this possible killer as the Rainy Street Ripper. Regardless of what's going on, this area is obviously really dangerous, so please just keep your eyes open and stay safe.
This woman got so pissed off at her husband, she sliced his wiener off while he was asleep. Her name's Lorena, and she just married this guy, John, a Marine, clean-cut, charming, picture-perfect military dude. At first, it is total honeymoon phase. They are in love, living together in Virginia, but then John gets kicked out of the Marines, and suddenly he can't get a job. So now Lorena is stuck paying all the bills. They're broke, constantly fighting, and John, he starts drinking heavily. Their fights get louder, more violent. Lorena said he'd punch her, choke her, slam her into the walls, but John claims that he was the victim. Said he'd subdue her in self-defense. Excuse me, what are we? Subdue? Are we the WWE? Then Lorena gets pregnant. She's excited though. She wants to be a mom, but John straight up told her, "You'd be a terrible mother," and then he pressures her into getting an abortion. And the toxicness continues for the rest of the year until one night. John comes home wasted. He bursts into the room, jumps on top of her, then forcibly rips off all her clothes and underwear and allegedly SAs her. And then he just passes out like nothing happened, and Lorena's just lying there, literally shaking. But she gets up, she goes downstairs, grabs a cup of water, and on top of the counter she sees a big kitchen knife, and then she just starts thinking about all the times that he would beat her, SA her, choke her. And without hesitation, she grabs a knife, walks back upstairs, yanks the sheets off of him, pulls out his wiener, and with one single motion, slices it right off. Blood sprays everywhere. John wakes up screaming, and Lorena panics. She grabs it, like physically grabs it, runs out the door holding it in her hand. She jumps into the car and speeds off, but she notices that she cannot keep the wheel straight, and that's when she realized she's still holding the damn wiener. So what does she do? She rolls down the window and tosses it onto the grass. The cops later get called, and they have a search team in the grass looking for a wiener, and when they find it, they literally put it in a 7-Eleven hot dog box. Like, I'm being dead serious. You can't make that up. But John goes to the hospital and gets it reattached, and apparently it still works. Both Lorena and John got arrested because 2 crimes actually happened here. 1, John was SAing her, and 2, she literally dismembered his member. Bars. So they went to court, but John was not found guilty because back in the 90s, it was believed that a man couldn't SA his own wife. But Lorena was also found not guilty too because of insanity. But John kind of became a celebrity overnight. He ends up doing adult films and stars in a movie called Frankenpeanut. I swear, I'm not making this up. But Lorena kind of became like the butt of the joke. A whole bunch of newspapers, late night talk show hosts, they're all making jokes about her, but that does not stop her. She later goes on to start her own organization to help those of domestic violence, as she should.
At first glance, it looks like a mum doing laundry, but what this camera captured was actually a mum scrubbing blood off her son's jeans. It was Mother's Day 2021 in Florida. 13-year-old Tristan Bailey had been really excited to make her mum a Mother's Day breakfast. She just thought it would be super cute to kind of show that she cared. Tristan was a student at Patriot Oaks Academy, and she was a super liked girl. She was stunning, she was a cheerleader, she was intelligent, she really had the whole package. That morning, Tristan's sister Sophia was prepping the breakfast, and she was like, hang on a second, this was kind of Tristan's idea, where is she? So she went and checked her bedroom, but she wasn't there, which didn't make sense at all because the family had all been out together the night before, they got back just before midnight, and they all apparently went to bed. The only real explanation was that Tristan had left after they'd all got back that night, so they rang the police. Where the hell was Tristan, and why had she left the house? So the first thing that police did was got CCTV from the local area, and they did actually spot something. They could just about make out in the grainy footage that Tristan was walking with a guy that evening. It was around 1:15 a.m. and she was just walking along with what looked like another teenage boy. So who was she with? Well, police decided to go all over the neighborhood, just interviewing everybody. One guy stood out. Now, this was Aiden Fucci, who was only a few months older than Tristan. The pair knew each other, and Aiden actually came right out and said, yeah, I had been with her that night. But he was adamant. He said, we walked around together for a little bit, and then she went off on her own, and I walked around for a little bit and then got back about 3 a.m. Was he really just wandering around? Did that even make sense? And disturbingly, when police spoke with Aiden and questioned him, they found he had a knife on him. It looked clean, and Tristan hadn't even been found at this point, so police just gave the knife to Aiden's dad. Was this a bad move? I just feel like I don't want to be harsh to the police, but this definitely feels like something that could be evidence. Now, one thing that really stood out was the fact that Aiden didn't really seem to be taking any of this serious at all. He wasn't even concerned about where his friend was. He posted a selfie in the back of a police car and posted it to Snapchat with literally a peace sign saying, "Hey guys, has anyone seen Tristan lately?" He was just taking videos of himself smiling, and he even said, "We're having fun." Then the news that everyone had been dreading. The jogger was out running at around 6 p.m. and found a body. It was a brutal scene. Tristan had very clearly been stabbed multiple times. But that wasn't even the most chilling part. On her ankle, someone had written karma. Now, Tristan, bless her, did not go down without a fight. She had over 40 defensive wounds. She was fighting for her life. So immediately the only real person that police suspected at this point was that Aiden. So they got him into the police station with his parents in a room with CCTV. And the parents and Aiden had a pretty eye-opening conversation, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think. The mum told Aiden Tristan was dead, and Aiden literally said, "How is that my problem?" And his dad hinted to him, he was like, "Why were you wet when you came home?" And Aiden had this story about how he'd knocked a cup of water over himself. Then there was a very weird interaction between the mum and Aiden, which made officers feel like she was hinting at something. It was essentially about the trousers that he'd been wearing, and she was kind of trying to hint at him to say he was wearing different trousers than he actually was, if that makes sense. Crystal, the mum, was like, "Were you wearing khakis or jeans?" And Aiden said, "Jeans." And she was like, "No, I'm sure you were wearing khakis, right?" And Aiden was like, "Right." Also, dead suspiciously, they were passing a phone between each other and like typing and then deleting it, so they could talk basically without being recorded. But if they thought they were going to outsmart the detectives, they were very wrong. Police had already got a warrant to search the house, and they found on the family's own CCTV, their own security system inside of the home, the mum doing something incredibly suspicious. She was seen scrubbing blood off Aiden's jeans. They also found in his bedroom a knife sheath, a blood-soaked t-shirt, blood-soaked shoes, and blood in the bathroom sink. "Mum, honey, you needed to do a lot more scrubbing." Aiden was arrested, and so was Crystal, the mum, for tampering with evidence. And so many kids that knew Aiden came forward at this point to say he was really weird, he always talked about killing people, and he drew really disturbing drawings. Crystal ended up pleading no contest and got just 30 days in prison. Aiden pleaded guilty and got life. What do you guys think about Crystal washing those jeans? Some people say a mum will do anything to protect their child, and others are just like, no, wrong is wrong, and if your child does something evil, they need to be punished.
He was obsessed with true crime and horror, and so he lured a woman to his flat of horrors and murdered her in order to reenact a scene from a gore movie. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Julia Rawson. On the 11th of May 2019, 42-year-old Julia had just spent the day out shopping in Wolverhampton with her girlfriend Elaine. After their shopping trip, Julia decided that she wanted to head out for a couple of drinks. She was going to go out by herself, and she accidentally got on the wrong bus to where she wanted to go, meaning that she ended up just going to one of her locals, the Cork and Bottle in Dudley. Julia was described as a very friendly, bubbly, well-liked woman. She was very well-liked and very well-known and recognisable due to her alternative fashion sense. She was the type of person who could go out alone and make friends with anyone. She had the gift of the gab and was very warm in nature. People would gravitate towards Julia. On this night, after arriving at the pub, Julia would notice a man sat in the corner of the pub by himself. She approached him and began chatting to him, telling this man that she loved his tattoos. And then she sat with him for a little bit, and this is just standard Julia, always looking out for people, making sure that they were involved, not feeling left out and not feeling alone. She was just a friendly person like that. The man that she sat with was 30-year-old Nathan Maynard Ellis, a man with severe mental health issues who was actually very well known to the mental health services. He had an obsessive fixation on anything morbid, macabre and disturbing, which is fine. Many people like us who are interested in true crime probably share a lot of these interests. However, Nathan took it to the nth degree. He was unhealthily obsessed with these things, to the point where he would idolise killers killers and wanted to reenact scenes from horror movies. He had actually once expressed to a mental health worker that he had a desire to R-word, hurt and kill women. He would draw very detailed graphic pictures depicting knife violence, beheading and necrophilia. He owned a large collection of true crime books and horror movies, and he aspired to be just like the people inside of these, with his collection of axes and knives. Over the course of the evening of the 11th of May, Julia and Nathan seemingly got on well. They spent the night chatting and laughing, and by the time final orders had passed in the pub and the pub was about to close, Julia and Nathan both piled into a taxi and headed back to Nathan's flat, which has been dubbed the Flat of Horrors. Throughout the evening, Julia had been texting back and forth with Elaine, and the last that Elaine would hear from her was around about 11 p.m. when she went to bed, and after this, she would never hear from Julia again. We don't know for certain what exactly happened to Julia upon her entering Nathan's flat. It's believed that she was struck over the head with so much force that she was knocked out before being murdered. Then both Nathan and his boyfriend David Leasley took turns dismembering Julia's body. Using a handsaw, the men dismembered Julia into 11 pieces, including decapitating her. Her remains would then be stuffed into carrier bags and disposed of in the nearby woodland. When Elaine woke up on the 12th of May and couldn't get into contact with Julia, either through text messages or through phone calls, all of the alarm bells were ringing because this just wasn't right. She spoke to their friends, all of which hadn't heard from Julia either, and none of them could get in contact with her. Elaine and their group of friends tried for 48 hours to find Julia, hoping that she would turn up somewhere, but she never did, and so Elaine would report her girlfriend missing to the police. Officers were able to track Julia down to that pub, the Cork and Bottle, and obtained the CCTV footage showing Julia sat with Nathan. 11 days after her disappearance, the police were able to track down Nathan and David. At this moment in time, they were still classing Julia as a missing person. However, a proof of life test that they had done showed that Julia hadn't touched her bank account or her phone since her disappearance. So the police were really concerned. When they searched the Flat of Horrors, they were taken aback by what they saw inside. A terrifying looking workman's bench with an array of sharp objects, extensive collections of horror/true crime related material, and so much more. They also noticed that it looked like a brand new carpet had been installed into the flat. This was ripped up, and there on the underlay was a patch of blood. Both men were arrested under suspicion of the murder of Julia. However, they both denied that they murdered her. Instead, they stated that Julia had slipped over in the shower and hit her head, and that she had died that way. After many searches of the canal, the nearby woodland and scrubland, and a nearby abandoned railroad track, investigators were able to recover all of the dismembered remains of Julia Rawson. They also uncovered several eerie CCTV footage clips showing Nathan and David walking along the canal holding carrier bags, which we now know had Julia's remains inside. A bin that was found in Nathan's mum's garden showed that something had been incinerated inside of it. Likely this was the bloody clothing that belonged to the men, but they also found traces of Julia's DNA. After a month-long trial at Coventry Crown Court, Nathan Maynard Ellis and David Leasley were both found guilty of the murder of Julia Rawson. David was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years to serve, and David was also sentenced to life imprisonment but with a minimum of 19 years to serve.
And he was 13 years old, making him the youngest murder defendant tried as an adult in New York State history. With that being said, I have to give a massive warning, as I do in a lot of my videos. This video does involve a child. So if you think that listening to this video is going to harm your mental health in any way, please skip this one, and I will see you in my next one. Take care of yourselves. I love you. Eric Smith lived with his mother, his stepdad, and his 2 siblings in New York, and when he was a child, he was not an easy child by any means. He often acted out and did things that wouldn't be considered normal. Like, for example, if he didn't get what he wanted, he would hold his breath for a really long time until his mother, Tammy, gave in and gave him whatever he wanted. When he was 3 years old, in the middle of the night, he got up and set a pile of papers on fire, which was incredibly dangerous not only for himself, but for everyone else living inside the house. And by the time that he turned 9 years old, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, he had developed an he was going through a pack a day, 9 years old. In school, Eric Smith was bullied relentlessly. He struggled with developmental issues. He was a couple grades behind in school because of this, and the bullies would just use this to constantly make fun of him. And Eric experienced terrible bullying at school every single day. And obviously, this affected his mental health negatively. Every day at school, he was called stupid, dumb, slow, ugly, and hearing that being repeated to him day after day after day, it turned into Eric starting to think of himself as those things, which is horrible. At a young age as well, Eric found out that his stepdad was not his biological father, and he found out that his biological father didn't want anything to do with him, which only further added to his depression and the negative thoughts that he often had about himself. Add to that the fact that his stepdad was kind of a horrible man. He was aggressive, he was mean, he was disrespectful. In other words, he had a terrible temper and he would take his anger out on his kids, both verbally and physically. So not a great childhood Eric Smith had. In my 1993, he was 13 years old, very much displaying disturbing behavior, very much struggling at school, and very much having a hard time at home with his home life as well. He's now being the bully. He's bullying kids while getting bullied. He's disrespecting his teachers, even at one point threatening one of them. He's developing a really concerning aggression and acting out both verbally and physically at home and at school. And he's just becoming more and more depressed, more anxious, more antisocial, and he started expressing his quote-unquote need or want to start bringing harm towards other people. It wasn't looking good as far as the path that he was heading down. 4-year-old Derek Roby was the most adorable little kid. He lived with his parents and his younger sibling in New York, and he was literally the epitome of a happy, active, loving 4-year-old baby. He loved playing outside, he loved playing sports, he loved spending time with his family, he loved animals, but more than anything, he loved being a big brother, and he was also so loved by so many people. On the morning of August 2nd in 1993, the Roby family started their morning off slower than usual. Derek's mom was occupied with his little brother who was a baby, and Derek was running late for summer camp. The walk from Derek's house to the park where the summer camp was taking place was only a 5 to 6 minute walk, and Derek was begging his mom to just let him walk because he was already running late. He didn't want to miss out on any time playing with his friends, and he was really eager to get to camp. And his mom ultimately made the decision to let him walk on his own. Like I said, it was around a 5-minute walk. It was straight down one road, and it was a route that Derek was very used to traveling down, but heartbreakingly so, his mother making the decision to allow him to walk on his own would be one that she would regret for the rest of her life. At the same time, 13-year-old Eric Smith was starting off his morning horribly. He just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. He was riding his bike around the park that Derek was heading to, and he was just being a menace. He was misbehaving, picking on kids at the park, being told to go away because he was being so disruptive, and then he noticed a little boy walking towards the park, Derek Roby. He rides his bike up to him, he starts talking to him, and he tells him that he knows that he's heading towards that park where the summer camp was taking place, and he told him that he knew a shortcut. And Derek, he's 4 years old, he's a baby, and Eric Smith is only 13 years old, and even though Derek would have probably considered him an older kid, he was still a kid at the end of the day, so for baby Derek to trust him isn't crazy. Of course, Derek didn't think, oh my god, this boy's gonna hurt me, he's out to get me. He probably just thought, okay, he knows a shortcut, I will go with him if it means that I can get to my friends faster. So the two of them start walking together. Eric leads him to a wooded area, and out of nowhere, he completely launches himself at Derek. With his hands, he's trying to attempt to cut off Derek's air supply. He's using both of his hands with such force around him until Derek falls to the ground. Derek is trying his hardest to fight back, but he's 4 years old. There's only so much fighting back that he could do. And then Eric grabs a napkin from Derek's backpack. He forms it into a ball and shoves it down his throat in an attempt to further stop him from breathing. He finds a rock and then a bigger one and uses it to strike Derek on his head. He then finds a 26-pound rock. He drags it over, he picks it up, and he drops it on top of Derek's little body 3 times. And as his last act of absolute horror, Eric then grabbed a stick from the ground and used it to SA Derek with it. Afterwards, he grabbed his little body and put it deeper in the woods in an attempt to hide it. And tragically, 4-year-old Derek Roby lost his life during that attack. And 13-year-old Eric, he just got up, he wiped off his hands that were covered in red liquid, hopped on his bike, and rode away. A couple hours later, the sky started to get really dark and it started to rain, meaning the kids from the summer camp were getting sent back home. Derek's mom, Doreen, was under the impression that this entire time Derek had been at the summer camp, and as soon as it started raining, she kind of just waited for him to walk in through the doors, but he didn't. And she recalls that she just had an awful feeling in her stomach. She didn't know why, but she just felt like something was terribly wrong. And when Derek didn't show up, and when she learned that he never made it to the summer camp to begin with, she felt sick. She panicked, she called the police, and very quickly a search started to find Derek Roby. The police were searching, volunteers were gathering to search, volunteers that included Eric Smith's parents, and less than 5 hours into the search, Derek's small body would be discovered in a patch of woods near the park. His body showed the results of a heinous attack. It was a mortifying sight for anyone who saw it. The woman who first saw him let out a loud scream, leading officers to run over and see what she had just found. Derek was covered in multiple injuries, an autopsy later showing multiple skull fractures, a lot of swelling on his brain, multiple head injuries, in addition to all of the open wounds all over his body, and the stick that Eric Smith had used was still on him. And in that moment, Derek's parents' world came crashing down. Their worst nightmare, one that they thought they would never have to face, was now true. Their firstborn, their 4-year-old son, who was the light of their world, was gone. He was taken away from this world in the most horrible way possible, and the devastation that they were now going to have to face was something that they were not prepared for. Immediately, authorities thought whoever did this was an adult, likely an adult from out of town, because people who lived in that area did not do things like this. Things like this did not happen in that town. The investigation began. Officers were questioning witnesses, kids from the camps, the parents of the kids from the camp, etc. And 3 days after the discovery of Derek's body, Eric's mom could see that Eric was acting stranger than usual, so she called the police to come over and talk to him again at their house, thinking that maybe he saw something or maybe that he had additional information that could be beneficial to the case, but she didn't think for a second that her son was the one responsible. She just thought that maybe he knew something that could be helpful. So officers show up at Eric's house, they sit him down, they talk to him further, and he says that he was riding his bike just after 9 a.m. when he noticed Derek walking towards the park. He said he didn't really see him well because he was on the opposite side of the park, but then he described in detail what Derek had been wearing that day in a suspicious amount of detail. And that made officers be like, you know what, let's just go to the park, let's reenact the morning, and let's go through where you were riding your bike, where you saw Derek, and let's just go from there. So they go to the park. Eric is standing with his bike in the same location that he said he was at when he first noticed Derek. And investigators noticed that from the spot that Eric claimed to be at, Eric should not have been able to see Derek, let alone what he was wearing, because it was just too far. And then during their conversation, Eric tells officers, I am not the type to do this to someone. I am not the type to SA someone. Yet, at that point, the SA that was done to Derek was not yet public information. Nobody knew that there was SA involved. There was no reason as to why Eric would have said anything of that sort. So that alone set off alarm bells in police officers' mind. They're thinking something is weird here, yet still they didn't think that he was the one capable of doing something like this, but they thought that maybe he saw something or knew more than he was letting on. Throughout the next few days, Eric started asking weird questions to the adults in his life. One of them being asking what the punishment would be if they found out that a child did this to another child. His mom noticed his weird behavior, as did his stepdad and his grandparents, and they sat him down to be like, okay, what is going on here? What do you know? Who did you see? And it was in that conversation that Eric turned around, looked at his mom, looked her in the eye and said, Mom, I did it. I snapped and I did it. I'm sorry, Mom. I little boy. Eric's grandpa, bless him, called the police immediately, and Eric was put in a cop car and driven to the station, which is where he gave his full confession. He described in detail what he had done to that 4-year-old little boy, and everyone was left in complete and utter disbelief. Eric's parents could not hear what they were listening to. The words that were coming out of their 13-year-old son's mouth, Derek's parents were absolutely mortified. Authorities were shook to their core, and when it was announced that Eric Smith, a 13-year-old boy, had been arrested and charged, his arrest became a national media sensation, leaving the public also shocked that a kid could be capable of committing such a terrible, terrible crime. Eric Smith pled not guilty, and in August of 1994, his trial began. The defense argued that Eric had a really tough upbringing. They talked about not only his home life, but also his school life and the bullying that he experienced. They claimed that as a result from that, he suffered from a mental illness that could be, quote, categorized as a rage disorder, end quote. They argued that he could not be held criminally responsible for his actions. The prosecution, on the other hand, was saying this is a kid that, although young, was more than capable of understanding right from wrong. He understood that what he was doing was wrong. He did it anyway, and for that, he should be held fully responsible for his actions against the law. In 1994, Eric Smith was found guilty and he was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison. It was ordered that he would serve his time in a juvenile detention facility until he turned 21 years old, and then he would be transferred into an adult prison. Years later, at 24 years old, Eric did an interview, and in that interview, he showed the same lack of remorse that he always had, but also agreed that if he had not been caught, he probably likely would have done the same thing again. He was denied parole 10 times, but on the 11th, after serving 20 years in prison at 41 years old, Eric Smith was granted parole and he was released. He was released in February of 2022. And in April of this year, April 16th of 2025, Eric Smith was discharged from parole supervision. Derek Roby will always be remembered as a little boy whose innocence touched a nation and whose life was taken away way too soon, breaking many, many people's hearts. His family continues to keep his memory alive, and they will miss him every single day for the rest of their days on this earth. A statue of Derek was made, and it stands on a hill overlooking the park that was built in his memory. The little plaque on it says, "Dedicated to be a gentle reminder of what childhood is meant to be. Derek J. Roby." Awful, awful story. It makes me want to throw up. But that is all I have for today's video. Thank you guys if you made it to the end for hanging out with me and for listening to Derek's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This is the last known footage of 4-year-old Cash Gernon, who was kidnapped out of a bed that he shared with his twin brother. He would later be found stabbed to death just 8 blocks away. In the early morning hours of May 15th, 2021, footage from a baby monitor shows 18-year-old Darren Brown enter a bedroom shared by 4-year-old twins Cash and Carter. The twins had been staying with a woman named Monica in Dallas, Texas for several months after their dad Trevor reportedly left them there to look for work out of town. Trevor said that he didn't want to disturb their schedule, so he left them with Monica, but after he left, he never contacted Monica again. And to make matters worse, the twins' mom had no idea where they were. The baby monitor showed Darren kidnap Cash from his bed, and the moments that follow are horrific. Darren carried Cash, still sleeping, 8 blocks away to a walking trail and proceeded to stab him several times in the chest, killing him. He then brought Cash's body back out to a public street and left him there. His body would be found a few hours later by a woman out on a morning walk, and she said she's never seen anything more horrifying. Cash was just laying there in a pool of blood, and ants were covering the bottoms of his feet. She called 911 and stayed with him until the police arrived, but it was clear he was already gone. Monica slept in that morning, and around 3 hours later, when she realized Cash was gone, she reported him missing to the police. After reviewing the baby monitor footage, Monica said she knew who the suspect was and that Darren lived in the neighborhood and would play with her kids. What's terrifying is that the footage shows Darren coming back 2 hours after kidnapping Cash and hovering over Carter, who was still asleep in his bed, but he abruptly left. At this point, Cash was already dead. Darren was arrested 1 day later and charged with burglary, kidnapping, and capital murder after Cash's blood was found on his clothing. It's not clear how Darren got into the home or what his motive was, although nothing could justify what was done to little Cash. Darren was reportedly at the home 2 days before the murder. At the time, he already had a misdemeanor and was out of jail on bond. Because of how publicized this case was, Monica's neighbor decided to go through his security footage and found that 2 months before Cash's murder, Darren was creeping around his house. He shares a back alley with Monica, and the video shows Darren opening up the gate to his yard, looking around, and then leaving. That neighbor has kids, so I can't imagine how terrifying that was to see. In 2022, Darren was found incompetent to stand trial after he was mentally evaluated by a psychologist and a psychiatrist. A third medical expert also deemed him unfit to stand trial. His attorney stated that he was in a trance-like state at the time of the murder and suffers from hallucinations due to being schizophrenic. So instead of jail time, he was transferred to Vernon Psychiatric Hospital. Since the murder, Cash's dad Trevor has released a statement on YouTube basically explaining why he left the boys with Monica. He said he knew Monica for years and went to go look for work out of town and just didn't want to bother the boys. But like I said earlier, he never once contacted Monica after he left. He never mentioned the boys' mom and didn't clarify why he never left the boys with family instead, as their mom's family had been looking for them for several months. Cash was let down by so many people. This is a story that will never leave my mind, especially as a parent.
3 little girls went to Girl Scout camp in the summer of 1977 and were killed less than 24 hours later. Lori Farmer was only 8 years old. She was the youngest of the girls. She knew that summer that she wanted to go to summer camp, but she couldn't choose between going to the YMCA camp or the Girl Scout camp, and it was actually her mother that urged her that she should go to the Girl Scout camp. Michelle Gousset was 9 years old. She had gone to the same Girl Scout camp the previous summer and was really excited about going to camp again this year. And Doris Milner, who went by Denise, was 10 years old. This would be her first time ever going to summer camp, and she was super anxious about it. She actually told her mother right before camp that she did not want to go anymore, but her mother convinced her that she should go. What's super eerie is that the day that Denise left for camp, her 5-year-old sister asked her mom out of the blue about death and what happened to people when they die. Her mom tried to explain it, to her 5-year-old daughter, and then her daughter just says, "Mama, tomorrow everybody is going to die." And the very next night, Lori, Michelle, and her sister Denise were all killed. On June 12th, 1977, over 130 girls and their camp counselors all showed up to summer camp. They're all nervous and excited. All girls were separated into 10 units, 10 campsites, and then they had 8 or so tents that the girls would share. Each unit looked something like this. So you see there's 7 tents which the girls would share, and then this tent right here was the counselor's tent. And then this tent, tent 7, was the tent that Lori, Michelle, and Denise were sharing. As you can see, it's the farthest one from any of the counselors, and this building right here completely obstructed the view from the counselors to tent 7. This is so dangerous and upsetting and frustrating. If you take over 100 little girls into the middle of the woods, you should be able to see them at all times, or at least see their tents. The tents should have 100% been closer to the counselors. And I know you could argue that hindsight is 20/20 and they did not know that something awful was going to happen. But what if I told you that the camp was actually warned that 3 little girls would be killed at this camp? Before camp started, all the counselors were brought to the campsite for some on-site training, and a lot of really weird things started happening. A lot of the counselors started realizing that food was going missing and no one was fessing up that they're the ones that took the food. Also, their belongings, their bags, looked like someone had gone through them. Some of their belongings were just missing completely, and then they found something straight out of a horror movie. 3 notebook pages were found at camp that just had the word "kill" written over and over again all over the pages, and then they also found a page that said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1. I mean, what the hell, right? And then the camp just completely dismissed this as a prank, and none of the parents that were sending their little baby girls to this camp in just a few weeks were made aware of this. On the first night of camp, there was a terrible thunderstorm. Michelle, Lori, and Denise were all sharing tent 7. There was also a 4th girl that was meant to be in their tent, but last minute she was switched to another tent, a decision that ultimately ended up saving her life. In the middle of the night, between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m., multiple campers and camp counselors started to hear and see some really creepy, eerie things. Multiple campers and camp counselors heard the most bizarre noise. It was like a moaning, groaning noise. It kind of sounded like a human, but it also kind of sounded like an animal. One counselor, who was only 15 that heard the noise, kind of shined her flashlight out of the tent, but when the noises stopped, she just went back to bed. Some campers said that they saw in the middle of the woods, off of their campsite, 3 lights that looked like they were from flashlights, and some campers were even woken up from flashlights being shined into their tents. And then around 3 a.m., some campers woke up to the sounds of screaming and someone calling out for their mama before the sounds all stopped completely. In the morning, one of the counselors was walking to the showers when she noticed a sleeping bag that was left outside kind of near the bushes. So when she got closer to the sleeping bag, she noticed that the body of 10-year-old Denise was stuffed inside. The counselor immediately runs to alert the other counselors and the owners of the camp. All the other little girls were moved to a different area and they distracted them with games while they did a head count to see who else was missing, if anyone else was missing, while police were brought to the area. And that's when they found the bodies of 8-year-old Lori and 9-year-old Michelle in the woods about 150 yards away from their tent. They were also in their sleeping bags. All girls were obviously gone.
They were not wearing anything, they had been badly beaten, and there were signs that all of them had been essayed. I don't feel comfortable going into any more detail about how their bodies were found, but guys, it was absolutely horrific. Near Lori and Michelle's body were also duct tape, a flashlight, and nylon rope, and then also a pair of eyeglasses that had been stolen from another tent. Their tent was absolutely covered in blood, and a man's footprint size 9.5 was found in the tent. This is absolutely terrible, but the camp called all 130 families and were like, hey, something terrible happened. You need to come pick up your kid, but they did not tell them on the phone if their kid was okay or not. Just imagine everybody's anxiety, and then Lori, Michelle, and Denise's families are all just standing there while all these other little girls are running up to their families and leaving with their families, just realizing that they will not be leaving with their child. 10 days into the investigation, it was announced that they had a prime suspect, a man named Gene Leroy Hart. He grew up only about a mile away from the camp, so he's familiar with the area. Also, he was supposed to be in prison for a 300-something year sentence, but had escaped prison 4 years earlier and was still at large. Gene was in prison for the kidnap and essay of 2 pregnant women. He also used the same duct tape and nylon rope in that crime that was found at the scene with Lori and Michelle's bodies. Also, the pregnant women said that while Gene was SAing them, that he made the most bizarre animal-like moaning and groaning, and if you remember, the counselors and campers said that they heard the exact same noises that night. Also, if you remember that a pair of eyeglasses had been stolen from another tent and then were left with Michelle and Lori's bodies, well, both of those pregnant women said that they wore eyeglasses, and Gene was super weird about it and wanted to try them on. They brought police dogs to the area, and those dogs led them to a cave that was only a couple miles away from the camp and only 100 feet away from where Gene grew up. It was clear that someone had been living in this cave, and in the cave they also found more items that had been stolen from camp and from the campers, so it's clear that whoever's been hiding out in this cave was responsible for this crime. In the cave, they also found 2 photos of different women, and they were able to confirm that Gene, when he was in prison, stole these photos from another prisoner. So this absolutely links him, right? 10 months later, they found Gene after a massive manhunt and arrested him. When they found him, he was also wearing women's glasses, so this man's weird with glasses. They also found him with multiple items that had been stolen from camp. When Gene went to trial, believe it or not, this man had so many supporters that believed in his innocence. There was DNA that was found on all the girls, and remember, this is like the late 70s. DNA testing was not the same, but it could be determined that this DNA belonged to a non-white male with type O blood, and Gene was Native American man with type O blood. And it was concluded that this DNA could only belong to 0.002% of the population. But the jury, they're not convinced. If you remember, there was a 9.5 male's footprint in the tent, while Gene was a size 11. Also, there was a fingerprint that was found on the flashlight with Lori and Michelle's body. It did not belong to Gene. So after only deliberating for 5 minutes, the jury came back with not guilty. Lori, Michelle, and Denise's families are shocked and devastated, and then it only gets worse because all of Gene's supporters start loudly cheering for him. Could you imagine cheering in a trial for 3 little girls that have been killed? You're disgusting. Gene was sent back to prison to serve out his 300-something year prison sentence, but only 2 months later, after being found not guilty, he passed away in prison from a heart attack at the age of 35. His funeral was attended by over 1,300 people, and is actually the largest funeral in that county's history. Investigators 100% believed that Gene was responsible, so they didn't really investigate further after this, and that's where this case stood for over 40 years until 2022, so not that long ago. With new DNA testing, it was confirmed that that DNA did 100% in fact belong to Gene. But since Gene was already dead, there wasn't really anything they could do at that point, but I do hope it brought some kind of peace to Lori, Michelle, and Denise's family. I've always believed, even before 2022, when it was confirmed that Gene was guilty all along. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind, but I've also always believed that this crime was committed by more than one person. I would find it really hard that he would be able to control 3 little girls. I mean, I know it's probably possible, but also if you remember, multiple witnesses saw 3 flashlights in the woods that night. Also paired that with the fact that Gene's footprint and fingerprint were not the ones found at the scene, I 100% believe that at least 2 other people got away with this. I'm really interested to get your guys' take on that. I mean, with the evidence, I'm sure a lot of you guys will agree with me. It's really sad that you know, all of these people got away with it. I mean, I know Gene didn't live much longer, but, you know, he lived thinking he got away with this and no one would ever know that he did it. And that really disgusts me a lot. Please let me know all your guys' thoughts and opinions in the comments. While you're there, let me know what case you want me to cover next. And I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.
If you think this is a cute pregnancy photo, you couldn't be more wrong. And the lengths she would go to keep up her lies are absolutely sickening. Huge pregnancy/baby trigger warning here. It was October 2020 in New Boston, Texas. The whole place was autumnal, cozy, and two women were getting super excited to welcome their new arrivals. Or so it would seem. Regan Simmons Hancock and Taylor Parker met online. Regan was 21 years old and she was already an amazing mum to an adorable little 3-year-old daughter. She couldn't wait to grow her family with her husband Homer. It felt like Regan and Taylor could just really relate to each other. They were both nearly full-term pregnant and were due to have their babies at similar times. Taylor was a bit older, she was 29, she was really looking to Regan for support. But that's not all she wanted from Regan. Taylor and Regan started hanging out loads in real life. It felt like it was kind of fate for them to meet online and just develop this friendship naturally. Taylor seemed like a great friend. She even took Regan and her husband's engagement and wedding photos for them. She was very much kind of there, supportive in those special moments. While Regan was kind of celebrating her pregnancy and getting super excited, Taylor was doing the same online. She was posting ultrasound scans and she was posting details of her gender reveal. Little did Regan know, Taylor was staging the entire thing. Regan shared a really cute social media post. It was thanking Taylor for bringing round a gift and a Starbucks for her. But Taylor would murder her the next day. On Taylor's supposed due date, she drove round to Regan's home. I don't know if we will ever really truly know exactly what unfolded between those four walls, but sickeningly, Regan's 3-year-old daughter was in the home. Suddenly, Regan was brutally attacked, and Regan's mum was the one who later on had to find her daughter lying face down in a pool of her own blood. When she walked into that house expecting to see her daughter and spend some time with her, she saw blood spatter all up the walls. It was an absolutely gruesome scene. And guys, as I said, big warning here, she was cut open from hip to hip. Her uterus was pulled out and cut, and her baby had been taken. Regan put up a huge fight. She had defensive wounds all over her hands to the point where one finger was dislocated and the tip of another was nearly cut completely off. She'd been stabbed over 100 times. It really was the most brutal death. While emergency services raced over there, drivers had noticed a car speeding down a nearby road. A police officer spotted this vehicle driving erratically and immediately pulled it over. And inside was the most gruesome scene he could imagine. He could see blood everywhere. Taylor was gripping the steering wheel and on her lap was a newborn baby. But this gets even more messed up than it probably sounds already. She had put the umbilical cord down her trousers to make it seem like she had just given birth. At first, the officer obviously had no idea what the hell had happened and raced the pair of them to hospital. And it was there that Taylor's lies started to unravel. This wasn't a mum that had just given birth. This was a murderer and the murder victim. Sadly, the baby was dead. And so was the mother, Regan. Taylor really had concocted a sick web of lies to convince everyone she knew that she was pregnant. And she tried to steal the baby out of her best friend's uterus. She was ultimately sentenced to death for this absolutely brutal crime, but her defense lawyer argued that her friends and family should have done more to protect her. Apparently they should have known that she was pretending to be pregnant and they were partially to blame. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like the only person that is responsible for these hideous deaths is Taylor herself.
How do a woman and a 6-year-old child both suspiciously die in the same house 2 days apart? This is one of those unsolved cases that once you hear about it, you just never stop thinking about it. I'm gonna give you guys some quick background information on the people that are involved in today's case. Also, just a heads up, this case does discuss someone who potentially may have unalived themselves. So just a warning if that's not something you want to hear about. Max Shacknai was a 6-year-old boy. His parents were Dina and Jonas Shacknai, but they had divorced. They're no longer together. and his father, Jonah, had started a new relationship with a woman named Rebecca Zahow. Jonah Shaknai was a very wealthy CEO, and when his relationship with Rebecca Zahow got more serious, Rebecca left her job and was kind of like a stay-at-home girlfriend, and Rebecca would watch Max a lot of the time when Max was over at his dad's house. Dina, Jonah's ex-wife and Max's mom, does not like this. She thinks if her son is over at his dad's house, he should be spending time with his dad, not his dad's girlfriend. Also, Dina does not like Rebecca. She thinks that she's pretty much a gold digger. So this entire situation is filled with tension from like all sides. Going into July of 2011, Jonah, Max, and Rebecca were staying at Jonah's summer house, but this place was really like a summer mansion. This place was huge. And on this day, Jonah went to the gym, leaving his 6-year-old son in the care of his girlfriend Rebecca, which he had done so many times before. But this time, it ended in tragedy. Rebecca said that she left the room for 1 minute to use the bathroom, and while she was in the bathroom, she heard a large crashing sound. So she runs out and she finds 6-year-old Max laying at the bottom of the stairs, completely unresponsive. I'm green screening, which I never do, but I think this will be the best way to show you guys what happened. Somehow, Max had gone over this railing, bringing this chandelier down with him. He was found laying, at the bottom of the staircase after going off this railing, and the chandelier was down with him, so he's just laying covered in the glass of the chandelier. How Max happened to go over the side of the railing, bringing the chandelier down with him, has never been explained because no one was around to see it. It's a mystery to this day. Rebecca attempted to give Max CPR as they waited for the ambulance to show up, but Max was in bad shape. He had severe brain damage, and by the time he was in the hospital, he was in a coma. Rebecca could be heard multiple times that day after this happened by multiple people saying, "Dina is going to kill me." Dina is Max's mom, if you don't remember, who hates Rebecca. Like family does in a family emergency, Jonah's brother Adam flew out immediately to support his brother and his nephew who's fighting for his life in the hospital. At this point, it had been 1 full day since Max was admitted into the hospital and he wasn't showing much improvement. So Adam and Rebecca, who don't really know each other, go back to Jonah's summer mansion to get some sleep while Jonah and Dina stayed with their son in the hospital. There would be a second tragedy in the same house that very same night. In the very early morning hours, Adam called 911 to report that he had found Rebecca's body and she had unalived herself. Her body was found outside her bedroom's balcony by a rope. Her ankles were tied up in rope. Her wrists were tied behind her back in rope in like really complex knots. There was a t-shirt wrapped around her head and stuffed into her mouth, and Rebecca was not wearing a single article of clothing. So this is the balcony that Rebecca was found outside of. This is outside of the house, and she's not wearing a single article of clothing. I've never heard of a woman or anyone unaliving themselves this way. Her wrists are tied behind her back. Her ankles are completely bound. This is bizarre, but it just gets weirder. Rebecca had 4 instances of head trauma. There was blood found throughout her room. There were signs that she may have been SA'd, possibly by a sharp weapon, and a sharp weapon was found in the house that was covered on bloods on all sides. The entire thing had blood on it. A neighbor also says that they heard a woman screaming for help in the middle of the night, but they didn't call 911. That's annoying. If you hear someone screaming for help in the middle of the night, please call 911. Probably the strangest detail in this entire case is a note that was found written on Rebecca's bedroom door in black paint that read, "She saved him, can you save her?" Like what? That sounds like something that someone in Criminal Minds or a horror movie would leave behind. What is that? It is also believed that that note was written by someone close to 6 feet tall. Rebecca was a shorter woman. She was about 5'3", but you know who was close to 6 feet tall? The only other person that was on the property that night, Rebecca's boyfriend's brother, Adam Shaknai. Another piece of evidence that might point to Adam's involvement are the knots that were used to tie Rebecca's wrist behind her back. They were complex knots and they were similar to sailing knots, and Adam was a tugboat captain. Tragically, only 3 days after Rebecca passed away, Max tragically also succumbed to his injuries in the hospital, making 2 strange deaths in the same house a couple days apart. And very quickly, Max's passing was ruled as a tragic accident, and Rebecca's was ruled that she had unalived herself because she was feeling guilty over what happened to Max, and they quickly just closed both cases. What's so odd about this is at this point when Rebecca passed away, is Max was still alive, and they were hopeful that he was going to pull through. So why would she unalive herself if there wasn't really anything at that point to feel guilty for, let me know what you think about that. That's just my thought process. Rebecca's family feels very strongly that this was foul play and Rebecca did not unalive herself, but also Max's mother, Dina, thinks that Max was also a victim of foul play. And actually, Rebecca's family and Dina both hired their own professionals to look into their loved ones' passings. And pretty much everyone that's looked at both passings, but especially Rebecca's, have said that, you know, this was foul play. There's something sketchy going on here. Well, everyone but the actual sheriff's office that handled this case, because like you know, they closed the case and is remained closed. Another super strange detail about Rebecca's passing is the night that she passed away, after she would have already been gone, someone used the computer in Rebecca's room and also Rebecca's phone to delete a voicemail off of Rebecca's phone. To this day, they never uncovered what this voicemail was. It's a huge unanswered question in this case. Rebecca's family actually took Adam Shacknai to civil court to hold him liable for Rebecca's death. This is different than criminal court because although Adam was found guilty in civil court, he won't, spend any jail time because it's civil court, like wrongful death, not criminal court. With the evidence that they had in civil court, Adam was held liable for Rebecca's death, which I find extremely interesting, but the sheriff's office just dismissed it and have not reopened the case. This case is so complicated. There's so much information. You could look into it for hours and hours and hours, and I suggest you guys do. I really want to know what you guys think about all of this. Do you think that Max was the victim of foul play? There is some evidence to suggest that the injuries that he had wouldn't have happened from the fall. There's also a lot of evidence that suggests that it was just a tragic accident. Also, really the only person in the house was Rebecca and also her younger sister. So why would Rebecca do something to Max? Also, do you think Rebecca was a victim of foul play or did she unalive herself? To me, there is no way that I believe that she did this to herself. But again, why? What would be the motive? Why would Adam do this to Rebecca while his nephew is fighting for his life in the hospital? It just doesn't make sense. I'm definitely so interested to read all of your guys' takes on this case in the comments. Please leave all of your theories and thoughts and questions in the comments for me. You guys are always coming up with connections and theories I would never come up with in my head. So please leave all that for me in the comments. And while you're there, let me know what case you'd want to see me cover next. I love you guys so, so much. And I will see you tomorrow. And I do mean that. I know I did not post for 3 days. I've been a little sick. I'm so sorry, but I didn't really have a voice. So there wouldn't be anything for me to even say. But I'm feeling a little bit better. So I will 100% see you guys tomorrow. Love, love, love you so much.
This is the story of Ronnie Neal. Mid-November of 2004 in San Antonio, Texas, 33-year-old Ronnie was passing out flyers for his lawn mowing business. This is where he met 58-year-old Diane Tilley, who was a teacher at Robbins Academy. Not only was she a teacher, she helped establish the school. She was like co-owner or something. She was up there in rank. She was up there. But Ronnie tried to give her a flyer to his lawn mowing company, asking to mow her lawn. But she said, no, I don't need my lawn mowed, but I do need my garden tend to. So that's what she hired him for. And Ronnie, not knowing nothing about working in a garden, he started immediately. And the two started to get to know each other. But as he's working, he's noticing that Diane got some money around here. He told Diane about his 15-year-old daughter named Pearl, about how she was a troubled teen and that she stayed running away. Now, this pulled at Diane's heartstring, so she randomly gifted him a swing set. And when he seen that, he figured this is the perfect time to introduce the two. So the very next day, he introduced Diane to his 15-year-old daughter, Pearl Cruz. On November 22nd at around 7:30 p.m., Diane is at home packing her bags. She had planned on going to visit her boyfriend for the Thanksgiving holiday when she heard a knock on the door. When she answered it, it was Pearl, Ronnie's daughter. She said her car was broke down just down the road and could she use the phone real quick. And of course, Diane let her in, but as she was fake like she was using the phone, Diane's back was turned. And that's when Pearl pulled the gun on Diane. She then let Ronnie in through the back door and the two started ransacking the house, but they wasn't satisfied. Ronnie then took Diane's ATM card and went to the gas station to try to clear her out, but Diane gave him the wrong pin. So at this point, he's pissed. When he got back to the house, he started letting off stray bullets, some in the couch, some in the floor. He then told Diane, if you don't give me the correct pin, the next bullet is going to be in your cat. Diane finally gave Ronnie the correct pin, and he went back to the gas station and got out as much cash as he could. When he returned to the house for the second time, which he left Pearl there with Diane by herself both times. When he returned to the house, he made Diane go to the back of the room. Now, Pearl looking like, what's going on? She's tied with shoelaces, by the way, Diane is. He put a pillowcase over Diane's head and started sexually assaulting her and told Pearl to hold the gun to her head. This infuriated Pearl to the point where she started throwing stuff around the room. When the two were done, they forced Diane into her car and took her deep into a random field. This is where Ronnie had shot Diane multiple times, but she did not die quickly. He even had to keep shooting her because she kept talking, but she wasn't just saying any type of words. She was praying for Pearl as she was dying. The two went back to the ATM to get more money out. Then they stayed the night at a motel. Now, the morning of the 23rd, Diane's co-workers noticed that she wasn't there for the Thanksgiving luncheon. So they contacted the authorities, and this immediately made the news. When Ronnie and Pearl seen Diane's missing report, they were shook. They took her car back to the scene of the crime and set it on fire. And it made their way back to the motel, trying to escape. They loading up the car with all the stolen goods, and as they're doing this, the police ran down on them. Now, while in custody, Pearl stayed quiet for a couple weeks, but Ronnie started running his mouth as soon as he got in there, told his cellmate everything. The police struck a deal with Pearl, said she'll only be tried as a juvenile if she told them everything, and she eventually agreed. She told the police where Diane's body was, and she was able to get laid to rest on December 11th. Of 2004. Now, February 21st of 2005 is when the trial started. And y'all, what came out on that trial? Pearl was pregnant the entire time. She was not only pregnant, she was pregnant with her father's child. Pearl admitted, yes, she was a runaway. She was living with her grandmother because her and all her other 9 siblings were taken away from their mother because their mother was unfit. So she would run away and go to her father's house. I can't think of the word when you become attached to your abuser, but that's what it sounded like when I was reading this, because Pearl said that this all started when she was only 13 years old. But that's not it, y'all. Ronnie used to sell Pearl up and down Austin, Texas highway to different men. This was some sad shit. But the trial lasted 2 weeks. Pearl was sentenced to 30 years in prison, but she ended up getting released in 2009. Ronnie Neal was sentenced to death, but the coward ended up taking his own life in 2010. He was ordering his prescription medication and he just took them all at once. But I forgot to mention, Pearl also said that the family knew. The family knew about the abuse and they never did nothing. And this how I know she's not lying, because they paid for his lawyer in court. The family paid for it. It's whole case is mind-blowing. Yellow tape. What y'all think?
This officer didn't just kill a 12-year-old boy. He unalived him playing Russian roulette with his life. His name was Santos. Him and his brother David were arrested for supposedly stealing $8 from a local gas station. But Santos had nothing to do with the crime. They're locked in the back of this police car, and for some twisted psycho reason, Officer Kane decided to play actual Russian roulette with a terrified 12-year-old boy. He whips out his strap and aims it at Santos' head. Tell the truth, he said. empty chamber. He screams even louder, "Where's the money?" And Santos is crying, "I swear I didn't do it, I swear." This time, the strap fires. A bullet rips straight through Santos' head. His blood splashed everywhere, staining his brother's feet, who was sat right beside him watching the whole thing. One pull of the trigger and Santos was gone. Not an accident, not self-defense, just straight up murder of a child. Kane was arrested and sent to prison, but here's the thing, he only served 2.5 years. I'm not even joking. 2.5 years for killing a 12-year-old boy in cold blood. And then he walked free like nothing happened. And I wonder, if Santos wasn't a poor Latino kid from the wrong side of Dallas, would Kane have gotten more time? Because Santos never even got the chance to turn 13. And the craziest part is, it still happens today. Nothing has changed.
This is the story of Andre Thomas. In spring of 2004, after still struggling with his long-standing alcohol abuse and mental issues, Andre started drinking cold medicine frequently. On March 5th, a friend had to take him to a mental health clinic because he started having manic episodes. Once in the clinic, Andre told the staff, "If y'all don't help me, I'm going to step in front of a bus." But the staff told him, "You should go to the emergency room." But he didn't go. About 3 weeks later, Andre stabbed himself in the chest and went to the emergency room in Tacoma Medical Center in Grayson County, Texas. He told hospital personnel that he wanted to cross over into the heavens. When his wounds were determined not life-threatening, the hospital wanted to keep him for psychiatric evaluation. But to do that, they needed a judge to sign the forms. While waiting on the forms to get signed, Andre wanders out of the hospital and nobody attempted to even find him. On March 27th, 2004, just 2 days after the emergency room visit, Andre kicked in the door of his ex-wife's home, 20-year-old Laura Thomas. Now, she shared her home with their 4-year-old son, Andre Jr., and her 1-year-old daughter, Leah, who she had with her current boyfriend. Once inside the home, Andre stabbed the 3 victims with 3 different knives. He said he didn't want to cross-contaminate the blood. He wanted to allow the demons inside of them to live. Laura's stab wounds created a large V shape. They didn't know if that was some type of message he was trying to send, but all of the victims were stabbed with so much force, their ribs had been cut open. He cut out a piece of Laura's lung, thinking it was her heart. He also took the heart of both of the children. Besides the body, Andre left $1 bill lengthwise, exposing the pyramid with the eye in the middle. It was said that he was obsessing over the pyramid with the eye, saying that the eye was evil. After he was done, he laid next to his ex-wife and stabbed himself in the chest. When that didn't work and he didn't die like he was expecting to, he stuffed their organs in his pockets and walked home. Once he got home, he took the 3 knives and put them in the sink. Then he changed his bloody clothes, left them on the bathroom floor. Then he called Laura's parents, which is right here, and left them a voicemail. The voicemail said, "I need y'all help. Something bad is happening to me. I'm scared to go to sleep. I think I'm in hell. Can y'all stop by my house when y'all get this message?" Boy, hell no. After that, Andre told his current girlfriend, yes, he had a girlfriend. Her name was Cameron Hayes. And he told his cousin what he had done. When they asked him why, he told them that he believed that Laura was a Jezebel and his son was the Antichrist. He also said that Laura's 1-year-old daughter was the embodiment of pure evil. His girlfriend said that he had a fascination with religion, especially the book of Revelation. He thought he was the devil. She said that he thought God would forgive him if he could stop himself from talking for 24 hours. So he would frequently duct tape his mouth. After he confessed, he turned himself in. But just a few days after his arrest, Andre plucked his own eye out with his bare hands while sitting in his jail cell. He then quoted Mark verse 9:47. "If it causes you sin, pluck it out. It is better to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye instead of 2 and be thrown into hell." Now, they took him to the hospital and put the eye on ice, but it couldn't be reattached. Andre was not competent to stand trial at that time. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and had to spend 47 days in a mental hospital. On March 15th, 2005, when Andre's trial finally started, his defense team tried to plead insanity because it did come out that He has had mental issues since he was about 10 years old, and he had a few suicide attempts in his early teens. The judge like, no, if he does have mental illness, it is worsened or heightened by his drug and alcohol abuse, which date back to his early teens as well. Andre Thomas was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death in 2005. Now, on December 9th, 2008, he removed his other eye and ate it. He said he didn't want the federal U.S. government to read his thoughts. Andre's execution has been rescheduled 2 times. He is still on death row today. I'm speechless with this one. What y'all think?